If you are a fan of the NFL, last night was a massive night for you and your team. As last night, the millions and all tuned in to ABC, ESPN, and affiliates to tune into one of the biggest NFL nights of the year, the NFL Draft. And when they got to the Jaguars pick, you may have noticed that it was Tony Khan taking center stage. It was Tony Khan sporting a neck brace from selling a pile driver from the night before on a wrestling show. That is what the commentators chose to talk about. This was discussed last night in front of millions watching the NFL Draft.
17th overall, but they traded down as Tony Khan becomes the first ever NFL executive in a draft room, shaking off the effects of a pile driver he received on national television in a wrestling ring the night before. Such is life when you mix AEW and the NFL. Tony Khan, hang in there, buddy. Hang in there. That's it.
Rich Eisen says, and I quote, "Such is life when you mix AEW and the NFL." Those words are reverberating right now through Stamford, Connecticut and WWE headquarters, because that is everything that company dreams of. How can we get mentioned outside of the wrestling world? Every morning they wake up, their feet hit the ground. How can we get mentioned on ESPN again? And they couldn't even fathom how to get mentioned on ABC. Tony Khan takes a pile driver right before the NFL Draft. And that is what the commentators in front of millions of people viewing and listening, that is what they're talking about. Tony Khan in a neck brace after getting a pile driver put on him. Such is life when you mix AEW and the NFL. Do you know how many years WWE has been trying to establish that relationship? Ecstatic with the new championship belts from the NFL and AEW in the NFL. That's what they're mentioning on the draft. And it wasn't even that. It wasn't even just that. Pat McAfee, their own commentator on Friday Night SmackDown. This was Pat McAfee on his own show in front of a massive audience. And this is what Pat McAfee had to say.
Well, last thing we need is for him to look like Tony Khan, who took a Meltzer driver just the other night. Wednesday night, he took a Meltzer driver, I do believe. That's right. Guy's got a broken neck, and he's battling through so he can pick up Ryan Collins Jr., and that mustache is never not going to be sweet. And Doug Peterson's 3 seats away going, the fuck is going on? Back to Trevor Lawrence, though. Go ahead, man. Well,
Pat McAfee, WWE's Pat McAfee.
Well, last thing we need is for him to look like Tony Khan, who took a Meltzer driver just the other night. Wednesday night, he took a Meltzer driver, I do believe. That's right. Guy's got a broken neck, and
there was a lot of people that did not think this stunt on Wednesday night was going to garner any real attention in the pro wrestling world. It ended up far surpassing the pro wrestling bubble, from Sports Illustrated to the NFL articles and every article in between. Several mentions during the actual NFL Draft telecast. This was the first real measurement of success from that angle on Wednesday night. The second big measurement is going to be just as important as the first, and that is next week's ratings for Dynamite. This week, you really can't correlate the two, because this big angle happened in the last 4 minutes of Dynamite. So the rating, this had literally zero effect on this week's rating. And then come to find out, I wasn't able to catch Dynamite live. Come to find out, not only were they up against NHL and NBA playoffs, but they were actually booted from their normal time slot on the West Coast. So they were taken off of prime time and I guess went live, catapulted to like 5 in the evening, I guess. Something like that. And then there was massive audio issues, is what I'm being told. So the deck was stacked against Dude anyway. He ended up pulling like 683K. One of the worst ratings I can remember in Dynamite's short 5-year history. So the ratings were absolute garbage this week, obviously. But and I never use excuses, by the way. Never use excuses. But damn, when you get booted from the West Coast time slot, when you have major playoff games across several sports, and then you have the audio issues throughout the entire telecast, man, that sucks. But through it all, dude was still able to captivate not just the wrestling world, but bounce outside of the wrestling bubble. And so much NFL coverage on this. I mean, that literally, guys, that's everything WWE dreams about. To be mentioned like this in NFL articles, to be mentioned several times on the actual draft telecast, to have their own commentator, Pat McAfee, giving a shout out over to that angle in Tony Khan and talking about taking that Meltzer driver, which, by the way, Pat, is now the Tony Khan driver. Hey, the Bucks stated it, not BC. But this was, I have to say, this was so cool to see because that was such a big thing to pull off on Wednesday. It takes a huge commitment. Everybody has to be like fully on board. Like every little detail has to be ironed out. Everything has to be presented if you're going to pull something like that off. And, just the Bucks stating who succeeds Tony Khan now, like that line making the audio. That's the storyline right there, right? Like they're trying to they don't like the way it's being ran by Tony Khan. The elite is going to find a way to run it. Who's going to succeed Tony Khan now? I thought that was it was masterful. And then you have Shad Khan, Tony's father, right before the NFL draft. This is a huge night coming up for Shad. One of the biggest nights in the calendar year. So he's in Jacksonville. He's trying to stop by, see his son, and he sees this. And Shad comes out. I mean, it's those little details. They're not so little, man. That big hug with Perry, and Perry looks at the hard cam with that grin. The Shawn Michaels raise handing of Marty Jannetty. You know the turn's coming. Everything was just so well done. And if you don't like AEW, if it's just not your cup of coffee, I totally get it, right? BC does not watch every week. I can't live anyway. But I'm just not captivated enough to watch all of these segments every single week. They have to change a lot of things. So I hear you. But if you just don't like AEW and that's just it, no matter what they do, you're never going to like them. This just provided you more material, right? Laugh at Tony, make fun, say it was stupid. I get it. But it wasn't. It was so well done. And this is exactly what AEW needed. Exactly what they needed. And I didn't even think they would transcend outside of the wrestling bubble like that. Just in the wrestling world, you needed a seismic shift. And I think the elite running AEW for a couple of months, right? While Tony Khan establishes his crew to take back his own company. What a concept. This is just needed. If they decide to go that route, maybe they have something different in mind. But I know that was an angle when I heard it on Wednesday night because I wasn't able to catch it live. I knew I had to see this. And that's what you want. We don't get those moments anymore, not even on Mondays and Fridays usually. You want those moments where if you did miss the show, unfortunately, and you heard something, you want to go back and check, not just the highlights, you got to go back and watch the entire segment. And you're kind of bummed you didn't catch it live. And I also, in closing with the Tony Khan saga, because we do have to switch over to Vince McMahon real quick. Wait till you hear this. And then I do want to talk Cameron Grimes, recently released WWE talent, because something's not adding up with that either. But we'll talk about that in a second. But in closing, I got to give massive props and so much respect to Tony Khan. Sporting that neck brace on such a big night for him, his father, the entire Jaguars organization. Sporting a neck brace. And when that camera was on him and they were talking about him and he was even kind of caught off guard. He takes his coffee. He's like, are we doing? And then Shad's behind him. Shad's like, oh man, they're actually talking about what we did Wednesday. But for him to sell that, dude, the dude knows. And no matter how much we want to critique Tony Khan or say he should have done this or should not have said that, totally get it. But damn, that is so much respect that he just did not go into that war room without that neck brace. And just totally acting like nothing. Oh, that's just a show. He could have done that. That's what wrestlers today do, right? They're in this big feud with somebody, and that night they're posting on the social doohickey machine a nice steak dinner with that person, right? Roman and Braun Strowman are in a big feud, and then they're backpacking in Europe on the European tour, and they're together taking selfies, right? Or remember Eddie Kingston and Cesaro, Claudio. Remember that? Eddie Kingston did so good at selling that they actually had a feud. Every time Eddie Kingston would mention Claudio, it's just about how much they have disgust for one another, and then you just see them at a steak dinner because the damn referee in the middle posted it. You don't want to see that, man. Sell it a little bit more, right? I'm not saying you got to take it like back as far back in the day as like Ric Flair. He would stay in separate hotels from the person he was feuding with. He would ride in separate vehicles. He didn't care if it was family and close friends or Four Horsemen members, that maybe there was a storyline where there was slight tension. You were riding in a different vehicle. I'm not saying you got to take it that far, but don't rub it in everybody's face that what you just saw on the show, absolutely nothing. They're eating steak and peas. Tony Khan's out there in the war room sporting a neck brace because he took the pile driver. Now you can take that further, right? Now you can say, oh, it's gotten worse. May need surgery, who knows? And it's just ironic, too, how everybody was talking about how bad he sold the gut punch, which was 4 seconds, he was unconscious, and then he started to sell it. Or how badly he took the Meltzer driver, which I didn't think was bad at all, by the way. I think he took that pretty damn good. And by the way, Pat McAfee, it is now the TK driver, the Tony Khan driver, according to the Bucks. But the irony is that it was his selling afterwards in that war room for Jacksonville. It was there where his selling actually put AEW outside the wrestling bubble and garnered those headlines and was talked about in the same sentence and breath as the NFL. Pretty damn cool, man. Just because he cared. If only more wrestlers cared, just throw on a neck brace. Care about what you're doing in those segments, in that ring. The story that you're involved in, sell it a little bit afterwards. Even if you keep kayfabe alive 1%, at least it's alive. But pro wrestling will never work if kayfabe is completely dead. Keep it alive. Even if just a little bit, keep it alive. Kayfabe has to remain, and it's up to the wrestlers to do such. That's the only way that we're going to care to keep watching your storyline and what you're involved in. That's the only way. Otherwise, if Tony Khan doesn't have that neck brace and he's bouncing around that war room, high-fiving and giving big hugs to everybody, that's in our subconscious. If it's really good, this storyline, we'll keep watching, but we'll remember Tony Khan just bouncing around that war room like nothing. Now, what we have in our subconscious and up front is Tony Khan sitting down, selling this neck injury in a neck brace. Yeah, much easier to follow along with this storyline now on Wednesday nights. Big shout out, massive respect to Tony Khan. That was badass to see him in that war room with that neck brace, and pretty cool that everybody for that telecast, all the way from the actual telecast to Pat McAfee and so many more, by the way. There's more clips, there's more articles on it. So cool to see this reach out. Again, this is everything WWE tries to accomplish every single morning when this company gets going in Stamford, Connecticut. How can we get mentioned on ESPN, let alone ABC or any other affiliate? AEW was able to do it with that one angle on Wednesday night. And again, the ratings, absolutely, that sucks, but it was the last 4 minutes of the show. It was never advertised Tony was going to be in that ring or taking bumps. This was just something that they wanted a big cliffhanger to get everybody talking for the following weeks to come. So next week and so on, that's going to be the real measurement ratings-wise. For this week, I don't give excuses, but again, it just got piled on top of Tony Khan, man. You had them getting booted off the West Coast time slot of prime time. You had multiple playoff games across several sports, and then you had the telecast long audio issues. It was just one thing after another, just booting Tony Khan in the balls. So it's, shitty that they pulled that rating. But now with everybody talking, now does it pick up? It's next week's show is just as, if not even more important than this past week's Dynamite. Because now you're going to have a lot of people talking about this. A lot of people are going to wonder where you're going with it. Even if they don't watch live yet, because that's the ultimate goal. Get them on their couch watching on their big screen live. But even if they're not there yet, maybe you already have them thinking, I'm at least going to check out the highlights or the clips. I'm at least going to give this a second look, and that's a start. Massive props to Tony Khan in that neck brace and getting all the talk last night during the NFL draft. Pretty damn cool. Switching over to Vincent Kennedy McMahon. So when it comes to VKM, a lot of people believe he's cashing in now, all of his stock, collecting his bank so that he can return to the pro wrestling world and compete, battle, go to war with his doofus son-in-law, Triple H, Paul Levesque McMahon. It just seems so nonsensical to BC. You're going to go to war with your own family, eliminate what you originally created, I guess, WWF/E, but take on your own family and then at Thanksgiving, sit right next to that same person and pass the mashed potatoes. Or you're going to go to your grandchildren's birthday party at the Chuck E. Cheese after you just got their dad unemployed. It's not that he doesn't have enough millions to last 10 lifetimes, but that's not the point. It seems nonsensical. But I do believe absolutely, especially judging by what we're about to talk about and what Vince McMahon just did, I do believe he's on his way back or wants to be back into that entertainment world. I do believe he wants to be a high-powered person in the entertainment world. And I always said, I believe he is not done with football. Football was his new passion. He really wanted to start a successful league. And that's why he doubled down on the XFL that second time. And when that was going under, it was The Rock, of all people, who quietly took over the XFL. And that was real quietly. The Rock was right there to pick up Vince's garbage when things were not looking good. And how quietly that was done is still mind-boggling. It always seemed like Vince McMahon was always going to come back before all of this came out, obviously, and his new legal woes. But before that, I always believed that Vince was on his way back to the XFL. I don't know if that was to take back ownership. Obviously, with what The Rock did with the XFL now, that's highly unlikely. But I always believed that Vince and The Rock were up to something much more massive. I still believe that, by the way. But I don't know if it involves... I don't know. I don't know how Vince McMahon fits into that, but I do not believe he's done with football. But either way, he's coming back into the entertainment world, or he's just not done, because what Vince recently did was he hired a massive public relations firm with a history of high-profile clients. Vince McMahon has obtained the services of Citric & Company, a firm with a lengthy history in the PR industry. Clients such as Make-A-Wish, Disney, Kobe Bryant, and Pepsi. Citric & Company is led by Michael S. Citric, who was once described by Fortune magazine as one of the most accomplished practitioners of the dark arts of public relations. And then the LA Times once referred to him as a public relations puppet master who has pulled the strings behind some of the biggest stories in media. So guys, this is massive, right? This is where a lot of Vince's money is going to, that he's cashing out, because this firm charges upwards of $1,400 an hour. $1,400 an hour to represent Vince McMahon. So Vince means business. Right now, he is going to clear his name, because this firm, right, this public relations firm, that's what they're all about. Taking a tainted name or company or entity and restoring it, right? Restoring an image or restoring reputation. That's what this firm does. And Vince is doing that now. So no matter where the legal woes take Vince and his legal team, whether to a trial, arbitration, however long it may even take, he's not waiting. He wants to restore that image, that reputation, everything. He wants to restore it now. So Vince wants to make power plays now. He's not waiting for this to be over. And the motion that was filed just last week, by the way, or earlier this week, I should say, was to push this legal case forward. That's how confident Vince and his legal team is that this Janelle Grant doesn't have any basis to this. And a lot of stuff that's coming out, the legal team for Janelle Grant is not really backing it up. too vividly. They're just saying, well, that's Vince spinning a storyline like he always does. That's Vince being Vince. That doesn't answer like what they're saying though. So I don't know. There's a lot more to this, man. There was no doubt that Vince did so much wrong, and I don't see him ever going back to WWE because I just don't think he's going to be welcomed back no matter what happens, or if we find out that a lot of this did have no basis. If we find out a lot of things we don't know right now, and Vince is walking away from this scot-free, that's good for Vince. But he still did so much wrong while he was in power. Just giving her a job because he was in a relationship with her, by the way. You can't do that, guys. Especially not when you're publicly traded, but that's just, you can't. Not in a position of power like that. You shouldn't be, for sure, banging broads in your office during work hours. He was doing that, right? And then sharing. There's so much that's wrong. We know that. So for those reasons, I only say that because for those reasons, there's no way he can go back to WWE. So if he ever comes back to pro wrestling, yeah, it would have to be with a new promotion. I just don't think he's done with football. No matter how or when he comes back, it's clear that he's just not done. He's that stubborn and he's that confident that he did nothing wrong in his eyes. So he hired this firm. He hired the best of legal representation. And Vince is ready to walk out of those courtrooms or walk out of those firms, and he's ready to be Vince again. Shoulders popping out, throwing cash money at anything he wants. That's Vincent Kennedy McMahon. We'll see. But that is huge news with the firm, man. Be interesting to see if they're able to restore his reputation. This will be their hardest client yet for sure. Moving on, I want to talk real quick about Cameron Grimes. Now, Cameron Grimes is one of the talents cut by WWE in the recent round of releases. And BC was just absolutely baffled by that decision. This is a dude that not only can go in the ring, but he can carry that microphone better than most of the wrestlers today. He's so damn good on the mic. He's got that personality and charisma. He can put storylines on his back. I mean, this dude can do it all. He checks off basically every box. And, Van Wagner is one thing. Xia Li baffles me. Jinder Mahal, as much as I actually liked Jinder, okay, you can make a case. But when you get to Cameron Grimes, you've lost me. And it was cool to see the rest of the wrestling world felt the same way. Like, the wrestling world, with this release, everybody was like, whoa, hold up. Wait, what? What did you just say? Cameron Grimes. Something wasn't adding up. And as we find out more info from Grimes himself, it looks like Cameron Grimes was done grimy, right? He was done dirty by a top executive in WWE. Grimes was talking about it. I don't know exactly. Maybe this was a podcast or some interview. I don't have the exact. I think it was. Yeah, I don't have the exact where this was from, but this was actually from Cameron Grimes. This is a quote. Over the past few months, I had been going to writers and saying, hey, I just want to work. How sad is that, first of all? The past several months, he was going up to the writers and go, dude, I just want to work. I'll do anything. I just want to work. The fact that Paul Levesque McMahon saw nothing in this dude, Cameron Grimes, you're not going to put somebody like Cameron to work? Because you want Dragon Lee to bounce around the ring with Ricochet? You're not going to put Cameron Grimes to work because we have to see another redundant, nonsensical match between LDF and LWO? That is just, I can't believe he had to go to writers for the past several months and go, dude, I just want to work. And the writers are like, yeah, but H doesn't have anything. At the end of the day, I just want to work, he says. I just want to work. He says it 3 times in this interview. I would hear that would make me kind of sound bitter. I don't understand that process. I don't understand how I came off as being kind of bitter. I guess every week when you're asking to work, I guess it starts to annoy people. I guess I could see that. So he thinks maybe he was becoming annoying because he was just like, dude, I want to be used. Whereas usually they're just like, sit home or stay in catering, be good, shut up and eat the triple layered moose cake. And Cameron's like, no, I want to work, man. I have so much to offer. He goes on to say, I was worried about his release or about that he could be released. He said, I was worried. I knew that I haven't worked in over a year. I'm making a decent salary, so I knew that if someone was going to look at the books, I'm going to be the first person that's going to be cut. If you're looking at it as strictly money-wise, but if you're looking at it as like, okay, well, if this is a talent that can do something for us, they're going to keep me. So I was told by a high executive last week on Friday that I would always have a job here. I would never have to worry about losing my job here. After expressing my concerns like that to him, that's what he told me. And then 5 days later, they called me and told me that I had lost my job. So I don't know. He says, I don't know. That's how he ended that paragraph. I don't know. Well, I know, Cameron. You got did dirty to. You got lied to. You got grimied. A top executive told him he would always have a job because he was expressing how he's not doing anything. He wants to work and he feels like he could be cut. So this top executive said, no, you're not going to be cut. Relax. You'll always have a job. And this dude obviously stooged or something to HHH or whoever and said he's being annoying. He thinks he's always being cut. We gotta just get rid of this dude. I mean, wow. If it cut, who? Not cool, man. Not cool at all. And this is one of those, sometimes there's a release and then they come back. Listen, if you're going to release Nia Jax, and it was justified at the time, you guys know that. If you're going to bring her back, good for her. But now you opened up Pandora's box. You better bring people back like Cameron Grimes now. You better realize you made a mistake. Listen to the wrestling world. Realize we're all baffled. Realize you did the dude dirty and bring Cameron Grimes back. And this time, do something out of the box. What's that? Let him work. The dude wants to let him work. Let him go in the ring and do what he does better than a lot of these individuals. That is wild to hear, man. Lied to by a top exec and then basically begging and pleading to just work. He just wants to go out there and perform. No. Sit at catering or go home. How does Paul Levesque McMahon not see what we all see in Cameron Grimes, man? Doesn't add up there, man. All right, that's it, man. There was a few other things I did want to go over, but that's the time that we have right now. I hope to be with you guys in a few hours, actually, man. I want to have a draft special for tonight's SmackDown and a full preview, a big contract signing. So be on the lookout. Stay locked in on the channel. In a few hours, you might be getting another bonus upload. It'll be pretty cool if we can get that out to you. Until next time, and there will be that next time. Top guys, we're out. BC saying check you. Peace.